My question is, you had a little bit of a kind of an analogy, and I don't know that we can pull it off completely, but maybe you can give people an overall view of it so they can kind of understand if you're still going, okay, I kind of get what he's talking about. Can you give a little bit of that analogy, at least like, maybe give people enough to think about it?
Yeah, so the analogy that I've seen that really helped me click of what an API is and how it works is a restaurant analogy. And so, you have your customers that come into a restaurant and they want to consume like a nice meal. They want to get something to eat, right? Well, that's kind of like your external program. They want to come into the restaurant. The external program wants to come into the program. It wants to consume something, right? It wants to be able to get some information or put some information in. So you have the people that are sitting down at the restaurant. Well, then you have the cook, which is in the kitchen, which is like the database of your program, right? That has all the information, has all the ingredients, has all of your company's information, and does all your processes. Well, you need something to interface between the people in the restaurant sitting down at the restaurant that are wanting to have that nice meal and the database, and that's where your waiter comes in. That brings the menu, to the guy sitting down at the table and says, here's your menu. What is it that you would like to order? And so then the waiter, takes that order. He walks it back to the kitchen. He gives it to the cook. The cook puts it together. But then the waiter then takes that and then takes that back to the people sitting down at the table and eating. And that's what the API is. The API is like that waiter. It goes to your external program or whatever it is. It asks, what is it that you want to get? Here's the menu of the things that you can order. And it then takes that order to the database or to the kitchen, and then the database prepares that order, and then gives it back to the waiter, which is the API, and then takes it back to that external program.
Right. The API is not doing the cooking, and you're still limited in terms of a menu,
right,
which is kind of one of the things I really want to kind of focus on. What do you think that people need to understand about the limitations and expectations when it comes to APIs and software? Because there's a blanket statement that I hear over and over again from sales software people that just basically like, oh, don't worry about it. We got an API for that.
Right.
And an API for that is not a blanket statement that can fix everything. There are limitations, but I think people need to kind of get that across. So what do you think that people need to be aware of, at least with some basic limitations on APIs in terms of what it can do?
Well, and that was kind of the reasoning why I wanted to do the session at the conference was because, when I first started, it was like, okay, I just need to check and see if a program has an API. And that was one, as I was looking at programs, it's like, hey, do you guys got an open API? Sure, yeah, we got an open API. They checked that box. But, as I started building the integrations between different programs and started really working with APIs, it's just not all APIs are created equal. There's a lot of differences between them. And the key thing is that you're limited to what is built into that API. You can only make the request and the calls and get the information and put the information in that was actually built into that API. So it's really important to read the documentation and to look at it and see, okay, what is that information that I can get out of that API, and make sure, when you're looking at that software, that you're not just saying, hey, you have an open API. It's like, well, what is it that you're going to want to get out of there? How can you kind of investigate that even early on to make sure that the information and what you're wanting to do, you can get it through their API. And that was kind of the heart for the session, was to help people and educate people that, you don't have to be a developer to really dig into APIs. It can seem like really intimidating, but there's a lot of tools out there now that, even make non-developers to be able to experiment and work with APIs, even if you don't know any code, so that you can see the information, jog those ideas, and come up with those ideas of how you want those programs to interact and how you want to bring that information together.